Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the October 27th Committee of the Whole meeting to order. I am Alderman Ron Singer, and I represent the 4th Ward. And I also have Alderman Dorothy Flanagan as our charming representative of that ward as well. If we'd like to get down to the agenda, if we may, calling to order, let the records indicate that Alderman Maladra and Alderman Sino are not present this evening. So if we can come down to our first order of business, which is the consent agenda. I am in need of a motion to approve of that.
Second.
The motion was made by Alderman Maladra and seconded by Alderman. Oh, no, it's Alderman Bruno, and seconded by Alderman Flanagan. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Motion is passed. That motion, of course, approves the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting on September 29th, 2014, and the October 13, 2014 minutes. We get down now to the next item of business, which is to recommend a draft ordinance authorizing an addendum to the mutual aid box alarm system agreement. I am in need of a motion. Alderman Marks makes the motion, seconded by Alderman Cummings. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an issue which has been in existence for over 7 years, and apparently it's in need of some new language. And Chief Olson is here. If any of you have any questions, to direct towards him regarding this motion. Alderman Flanagan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a date of somewhere in 2012, and it said something about having 3 years. I'm trying to locate it, so.
Maybe I could just quickly run over it for you. The MABUS master agreement was signed by the city in 1991. It provides the structure under which we receive and provide mutual aid, not only locally, but on a statewide basis.
I found it, so.
Okay.
It just basically says that the state, I'm assuming, initiated it on October 27, 2012, and then they have an effect until 3 years. Does that mean that this will change?
No, that means
somewhere
that this agreement needs to be done, but within 3 years.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? Anyone from the audience? Motion has been made, seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Chief, can I just interrupt for 1 second? I should have asked a simple question, explanation here. We often respond to mutual box alarms in the neighboring towns. Which are the ones we typically are quite often?
Microphone.
Alderman Brown, would you please put your mic on?
Thank you.
What
Which are the
communities-
neighboring towns that we typically are often involved with mutual aid box alarms?
For box alarms, most typical would be St. Charles, West Chicago, Batavia, Elburn. Those are most typical ones.
And this is actually happening fairly often, as I understand.
Well, they have to draw a little distinction, but I'd say there's a box alarm about once a month, maybe every other month. And it's a higher level alarm. For those that aren't familiar with that, that's something that it's a level of an incident that exceeds the ability of the initial responding resources to manage. So additional resources are needed. That can be done on either fire, or, EMS, medical, hazmat, technical rescue. Those are the four most common where mutual aid is sent and received. We also beneath that, we have what's called automatic aid agreements, and that's begun with mostly with St. Charles. Well, it's all 4 departments around us. There are certain areas where they respond in automatically, and that we respond to them automatically. It's just as soon as the alarm comes in, we're dispatched. That you see far more often. That happened this afternoon at Fire at Laurel and Apartments in Batavia. We have several layers of aid built into our system.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Chief. Going now to item 4B, we are recommending a draft resolution authorizing the purchase of a 3-ton dump truck with snowplow from Rush Truck Centers in the amount of $136,500. And this is a budgeted item. I am in need of a motion.
So moved.
Motion made by Alderman Stoney, seconded by whom?
Second.
Alderman Cummings. Thank you. Any questions on the item? Anyone from the audience? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. We move down to item 4C. We are recommending an adoption of the Economic Development Incentive Policy. Council members, a motion, I need a motion for this motion. I am in need of a motion. Motion
Second.
by Alderman Marks and seconded by Alderman Cummings. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Jason Michnick, who is our intern working in the Economic Development Department, and he is working under the guidance of our quite capable director, Ellen DeVita. So, Jason, please, if you would be kind enough to do your presentation.
Thank you. Council members, thank you for having me. My name is Jason Michnick. As I was just introduced, I am the intern for the Economic Development Department. Here we go. So I am here to present to you guys a formal economic incentive policy. Currently, the city does not have an economic incentive policy. However, in the past, we have, the council has taken action and given incentives for business development. So why does the city need a written incentive policy? First and foremost, it's the formal, consistent communication of city policy. This is with the business community, both developers, property owners, investors. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It may not be on.
It might not be on.
Is it on?
Is it on?
Tap.
Tap it and see.
Your microphone on?
It is on. So again, to communicate with the business community, developers, investors, property owners, as well as administration, and most importantly, the citizens of Geneva. I want to point out that any incentives should be used judiciously, and having a written statement is going to protect the city from the appearance of impropriety. Any incentive policy shouldn't be broad in nature. It should be targeted, and it should support adopted planning documents, which are already in place, such as our master plans and our comprehensive plans. And it should also be a long-term framework to guide future incentive use after the current goals stated in our planning documents are achieved and new ones are established. This policy should carry forward and be applicable to those goals as well. So where should incentives be considered? First, we should use them in high-profile opportunity sites, again stated in our adopted strategic plans. Ideally, any new project that's brought forward and it has the use of incentives, it will bring new infrastructure and utilities to the city, whether that's expansion of our electrical system, sewer and water, or fiber optic networks. It should also strengthen the existing business, improve co-tenancy and industry clusters in the city. It should provide a balanced and increased tax base, which is measured, again, by either sales tax revenue or an increased total EAV. And it should bring in new quality jobs and potentially new industries. I want to note that not all jobs, new jobs, are quality jobs. We want them to be high-paying jobs. And not all industries are going to be good for Geneva. We don't want a company coming in that's going to dump pollutants into the river or cause any problems. Mainly, I want to talk about the considerations and the cautions for the use of incentives. Incentives should only be used if a funding gap exists that cannot be covered privately. This is commonly known as a but-for statement. If not but for the use of public dollars, the project would not move forward. And also, with this policy recognition, there would be potential for a third party to review the return on investment and the number or quantity of incentives to be used. This is one of the most important parts, I think, of it, is that the burden of evidence falls on the applicant. Anybody coming forward and asking the city for public monies, they need to provide and show that there is an existing funding gap, and also they need to show us that their project is going to have a positive economic improvement for the city. Any agreement that the city goes through with an incentive should have performance measures in place, and if the applicant and the receiver of the incentive does not measure up, then we should have a clawback provision in the agreement that allows us to recoup these funds. Also very important, any opportunity for incentives would apply both to new businesses that we're trying to recruit, but also existing businesses in Geneva that are looking to expand. The application and the review process, all applicants would be filing their written request with the Director of Economic Development. This is another reason that we would need a written statement. We need the administration to be able to know how to filter these requests that are brought forward by businesses, and the request would include a pro forma documenting the need for assistance. It would also, at that point, be reviewed by administration and any third-party consultants. Again, that's to measure how much incentive should be given, or if at all, any potential return on investment. And ultimately, the City Council would still act as the decision-making authority on a case-by-case basis. Also, evidence of positive economic impact does not guarantee an incentive. If a business comes forward and they can prove that there is a funding gap and that they would have a positive impact on the city, it does not mean that the council has to give them money. Because we are a non-home rule municipality, we're limited to the type of incentives that we can give that are by the state statute. This would include TIF districts, which we currently have one and are looking to expand other ones, a business district, special service areas, sales tax rebates. Specifically for this incentive, it should be noted that any type of agreement should be any current sales levels. Any incentive would only be given for amounts added above those sales tax revenues for that project. Property tax abatement, however, because of the state statute, this can only be given to businesses who are relocating their headquarters to Geneva or expanding manufacturing firms within the city. Recapture agreements, this would be for businesses that are willing to invest in infrastructure development within the city. Reduced fees and utility, and then also discretionary city revenues. If you guys will turn to the page in your policies labeled Appendix A, this goes over sub-areas within the city where targeted development could be used. The areas are downtown, bed and breakfast, Randall Road, industrial, Kirk Road, entertainment quarter, and miscellaneous infill. Downtown should be primarily retail. That's something that we've stated. Bed and breakfast, that could be several areas within the city. However, currently there's only a few businesses within Geneva that provide revenues for hotel and motel tax. So this is a need that the city has. We do have a leakage here in terms of lodging. Randall Road should be kept predominantly big box retail and national chains. Industrial, this is going to be our southeast master plan area. Again, this is going to be where our property tax abatements, waived and reduced connection fees, recapture agreements can be used. Kirk Road Entertainment Quarter. Currently, the county is proposed the redevelopment of Sellers Hill, so you could use that as a leverage, find some additional lodging, destination entertainment type of businesses to recruit into that area of the city. And then again, miscellaneous infill projects is going to be a case-by-case basis the council would have to look at. Some regional examples of incentives. A number of municipalities have formal policies in place. This one that I've brought forward is more of a guideline versus a prescribed formula that some other cities have. If you guys take a look at this chart, this is some examples from local municipalities. Often they give a formulation specifically for the amount of incentives that are going to be used, whether it be a percentage of costs for the project. Most of them max out at 50%, meaning that you're going to have some sort of private investment that's either matched equally or by a greater amount privately. Or there's also a maximum amount of grant the city will issue to any one person. There is Highland Park, which I don't have on here. They charge a $5,000 application fee for anybody coming to the city asking for city funds. And also, there's some cities that have minimum sales volumes if they're going to give a sales tax rebate. So just to bring up some of the main points again from the recommendation, the proposed policy summarizes past practices, City Council has offered incentives in the past to spur redevelopment and development of new projects. It's a formal statement of willingness, again, to protect the city from the appearance of impropriety. And the burden of proof falls on the applicant. This is huge. I think the council needs to recognize that anybody coming forward asking for money, they're the ones that are responsible for providing evidence that they need it and that it's going to have an impact. So this administration doesn't need to waste their time looking and researching to find whether or not incentives should be offered. Public investment should only be used in low-risk situations, which is going to be reviewed by a third party to calculate whether or not an incentive should be issued and how much. It should include performance benchmarks and clawback provisions so that if the benchmarks aren't met, the city can recoup these funds. And again, equal opportunity for both new businesses and existing ones looking to expand. Thank you.
I wonder if many of you recognize these incentives in as much as they were, was it Goal 6 of our city's comprehensive plan that we introduced some years back. So are there any questions? Alderman Cummings.
I'm curious about the burden of proof. I like it and I don't like it. I like the idea that the applicant should come up with the idea, come up with the supporting logic, the reason, run the numbers, all that, and present it to us, rather than us going out and saying, do you need some help? What can we do? On the other hand, part of the burden of proof example was that they have financial need. They have a financial shortfall. That's where, in my mind, it begins to break down because I can imagine a business coming to us and saying, I have the money to do what I want to do, and I'd like a break. And I'd simply like a break because it's good for my business. And if you give me a break, this is how much you'll make. I'm not short funds. I've got more money than God. But I'd love to see a break. And as a council member, I could see myself reacting positively to that, regardless of whether or not they had a shortfall. So that's my
My response on that, can you hear me? It is funny. You can hear me? Okay. I could potentially see that being an area where the council would want to help if it was something significantly new that would create a new attraction, such as a grocery store downtown. But other than it being a significant job creator or delivering a co-tenancy that could help fill a half-empty shopping center like where the Dominick's is, why would we help someone who doesn't need money? These are public dollars, and I don't believe it would be, personally, I don't believe it would be fair to existing businesses. So that's a policy decision for the council to make. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this discussion tonight. In the past, when I've worked with pro forma reviews of these kinds of projects, you've got a consultant in place who is looking at the cost of funds, that we're putting X number of dollars in for this type of project. The materials are going to cost this. We're expecting a rate of return of this. You know, if the average bankable loan is at a rate of return of 12%, why should we put public funds in and give somebody 18%? You know, it's not our job to make somebody more money. It's our job to help the community. So
I understand. However, if someone, makes us an offer we can't refuse,
it's policy
I think,
decision.
gosh, we can put $100,000 into this where the person needs some money and we get an X% return, or we put 100 in over here and they don't need the money, but man, if we put it in, we triple the money. I can see that's a policy decision. I'm not sure that I would want the things written so restrictively that we wouldn't be able to give money to a group that had funding but was looking for some kind of break.
And I think that what we've given you is not that restrictive, because if you look at the document and you look at the desired outcomes, there could potentially be, on page 1, towards the bottom third of the page, desired outcomes of incentives. There could potentially be an area there why it does bring so much to us that the city does want to help them. But again, I personally, in my professional career, when making recommendations to councils, and it's been very minimal, you'll recognize I've been here 7 years and we've given one incentive, and it's been a property tax abatement for Roquette. There's been no sales tax incentives in the last 7 years. So I'm not a proponent of incentives, and that's just my personal preference. You do have some leeway under that outcome list there. If it's something that is rewarding to the community. And usually, when I have in my 25 years of doing this recommended an incentive, it's because there was a level of risk. And we were opening up a new industrial park, or we were bringing a grocery store that creates co-tenancy for other commercial leases. There's usually something very big, and you're popping something big. You're bringing in a large water user if your water utility needs the revenue stream. You know, there is leeway in this.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Alderman Simonian?
You want to address that?
Thank you. I was just going to follow up on Alderman Cummings' comments. I think you have to look at this as a general guideline. It's not going to apply 100% to every specific request that we get. But what we're looking at is, in general, most of the requests that come forward say, I can't open without the city's help. I can't expand without the city's help. I don't remember anyone ever coming forward saying, I've got plenty of money and I don't need you guys, but I would like to have some money. We don't receive those kinds of requests. We receive requests when somebody wants to do something that they need our help, and otherwise, but for they could not do. So I think you have to look at this as a general guideline. And will there be exceptions? Perhaps, I hope so, that it's so unique and so beneficial to the community that we would discover, okay, they don't need our help, but this is an opportunity for us to take this to the council to suggest that they might want to discuss taking this risk. I think that you've got, the staff in place to recognize that, but in general, 99% of the folks coming forward are saying, I can't do this but for your help. So that's what we're looking for, is something that we can hand to people to say, this is our policy/guideline, this is what the council has done in the past, because that way they know what the expectations are, staff knows what the expectations are, and we have a foundation to start discussing things from.
But I will say, I can think of two in my career where they came and said they needed help, and then I found out they'd already executed their lease, to which I said, you can do this, you don't need our help, and they did come. So it does happen. They're not going to tell you they're flush with cash. But that is a current climate right now, and it started with Arthur Anderson, and there are consultants out there, and their whole job is to try and bring incentives to a project. And so on a daily basis, I'm weeding out, do they really need the help, or do they not, or are they just asking? And because they're public dollars, I think that they have to show that they really need it, and there's a huge benefit for us. And that's for you to decide as your policy decision. And this does give you more leeway than the perspective I'm putting out there as my personal. So,
Alderman Simonian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. I'll start with, since that was Alderman Cummings, one of his issues. I totally agree with you, Don. I say you leave it open to anybody who has an opportunity, whether they need the money or they don't need the money. There might be an opportunity, in my opinion, that we're in competition with our neighboring communities or another community, and they're just looking for a deal to get them here. They have all the money, but they're looking for, quote-unquote, the deal. And if the deal is worth our while, I don't think we should eliminate that opportunity, in my opinion. We should leave it wide open. Plus, I don't know, I don't know how comfortable I am as focusing on businesses that don't have the money to start a business. It's like, okay, well, you don't have the money, well, come on over here, we'll give you some money. I mean, you talk about low risk. it's a low-risk venture, yet this is the high-risk, we're starting on a high-risk platform, in my opinion. The other thing, too, is under these desired outcomes and incentives, these 8 bullets on page 23 in our packet, I would add the verbiage that says directly and/or indirectly impacts all these things, because I believe there's businesses and business opportunities out there that can impact these things indirectly that would be in our best interest and not necessarily all have to be directly focused.
Tom?
Yeah.
It says at least one, it doesn't, I mean, we can add the directly or indirectly, but it just says one of the following. So that's
Okay.
even less,
Yeah, minimum of one.
yeah, that's more minimal than what you've stated.
Okay, well, if
Okay.
that's one, or adding that, so no matter what, there's an opportunity for us to participate, even if they only have one, but it indirectly impacts that,
I could say
Particular-
should directly or indirectly fulfill at a minimum one,
yeah.
added in there.
Under considerations and guidelines, same thing as a lot of this verbiage, I would add the verbiage that talks, that would impact directly and/or indirectly. Under review and approval process, I would like to see, as a council member, any application that came through, regardless of whether it was approved or disapproved, more so out of curiosity than anything else. Plus, I think there's some creative ways to get financing through the private sector that some of us have access to that might be able to help the cause. And then incentives by sub-area, I don't know that I would, I don't know that I would define it this fine-tuned. For example, under entertainment corridor, I would just leave the title of entertainment and not focus on a specific corridor. And then I would add a general description for any and all other options brought to the city could possibly qualify as well. And let word get out there that Geneva is willing to entertain incentives. And let's see what we have, and then make the decision based off what we get versus immediately eliminating potential opportunities.
I
That's my
think
2
the
cents.
infill does that, the infill category.
That's what that means.
That's what that one was for. So if it's not stating it to you, we need to wordsmith it,
Okay.
so.
Alderman Flanagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To dovetail on what Alderman Simonian said, does the infills properties discuss service businesses, or is this strictly just retail?
Again, if you go back to the very first page, it could be any type of business if it
Okay.
was utilities or job creation or.
But there would be no tax rebate because of the fact there would be no
Correct.
retail
It's not just
tax.
retail sales tax, correct.
Okay. So I did ask you some questions earlier, and I agree with you. I wouldn't be so generous all the time to give an incentive. I would try to evaluate the business that was coming in, like you have been doing, and I like that approach. And because I like that approach, I'd rather, instead of saying this is a policy, I'd rather say this is a guideline and give it to the Economic Development Director or department and basically have them be the one to really filter out all of this information rather than setting it as a policy. I just get frightened when it says policy because it seems like it's etched in stone, and so I'd rather use it as a guideline. Because I think on a case-to-case basis is really how we have to evaluate some of these things that are coming, some of the businesses that are coming in. So that would be my way of doing it, rather than saying that it was a policy. The third party you mentioned would be like a TIF consultant, is that?
Yeah, there's financial consultants out there that have elaborate spreadsheets to do this, and the cost would have to be borne by the
And
applicant.
they're, okay, I just want to make sure.
Should we put that in here, that the cost is borne by the applicant?
That would be something that I would like to see. I don't know if we're micro dissecting this document, but
Can I make a comment on that? You know, some communities like Highland Park, Jason referenced, they only entertain large-scale incentives. Like the Highland Park is, they have to produce at least $1 million in sales tax, and that's why it's a $5,000, fee, because this is going to be a lot of review of the project. All of this is up to the council's decision, so I don't want to interject at this point. You guys need to be going back and forth on this,
and
please.
since you brought this up, I just wanted to know how many of these cities had policies in place. Does anybody know that?
Well, these were all written documents found on the internet, so I would say they're policy,
Okay.
so.
I call them guidelines, so other people can call
Mary?
them policy. I just
They're-
used the verbiage. so-
Policy, guidelines, they're synonyms. I looked it up, so.
Okay.
There, I
I
mean,
just had
policy
this-
can't be.
Talked to
and
Mr. Webster today.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a policy is, it's a guideline.
And it
that's
can
what-
be changed at any time?
Yes. Yeah, it's not a law, it's not an ordinance, it's just a guideline. Obviously, the council needs to make those changes.
Right. And then I was trying to figure out how you could detect, and we did discuss this, but I thought I'd throw it out just for conversation, the annual payroll, because I was wondering how one could get that information, and you said that it was state accessible? Or
If
explain
we were
that
to,
me.
if we were to require, for example, if we wanted a clawback that 100 jobs needed to be produced,
Right.
we would write that into the agreement, and we actually did that with Roquette, that they would create certain number of jobs. And a clawback provision, you're usually going to require an annual certification from the company. The state does that all the time with their edge tax credits. They have to say how many jobs they'll create and prove that they created them.
Okay.
So we could write whatever we want to in our own agreements, saying they have to provide on an annual basis, again, that burden of proof.
Yeah, because I don't know how many businesses come in here where we're actually hiring Genevans to fill those positions, or are they additional people coming into the community as a result of this particular
Well,
business?
that isn't anything, we did not suggest that jobs be given to local residents. We didn't get that specific.
Right.
St. Charles did discuss that last year when they brought in Clark Environmental, where they were going to give more because it was local resident jobs were promised. That's not something that we recommended here.
And what was the reasoning for that? Just,
It was just their council's desire, so. I think it was funny, when I was in St. Charles from 98 to 2005, I remember Geneva was doing sales tax abatements, and the word on the street was that it was 25,000 square feet or more, 7.5%, 7.5 years, 0.5% of the sales tax. That was a known formula. And we're not presenting any known formulas here, but that's what Jason meant when he said what we've got here is guideline, not formulaic.
okay.
So, just a thought out
Because I
there.
would like to stay away from the formula.
Everybody seemed that way last year, so we didn't present it this way this year. So, we did discuss this last year at a policy discussion.
Alderman Bruno.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I read this several times, and I'm not sure if I'm interpreting it differently than some others. It seems like this doesn't really take anything off the table.
It does not.
It does come to the council in terms of economic incentives. I agree, and I think we've had this discussion in terms of being very prudent with those types of incentives. I see the value in this in at least having something that can at least put something on record, say these are the kinds of things we're interested in. Nothing's off the table, but it might speed up a little decision-making. I'm not seeing this tie us into any sort of commitment or specific types of incentives other than ease of staff being able to talk with potential applicants, so I'm
And I'd like to clarify, the incentive types listed are what are statutorily allowed. It doesn't mean we would do any or all for anybody. It's just what's possible.
right, and it states in here, and the presentation, there's no guarantees that even if they met those things, that we're obligated to any incentive. I think it's just, to me, it seems like an aid for staff, and I'm perfectly fine with that,
And for the applicant.
and for the applicant, too.
And if I may chime in, I think an added aid for all of us. Because oftentimes we're approached too, saying, hey, is the city interested in perhaps, well, my advice is first talk to our economic development director. However,
Right.
we do have some guidelines in place that, yeah, so,
But, yeah,
Excuse
I'm-
me for doing
I'm-
it.
I'm
That's
fine
quite all
with
right.
it. Thank you.
Are there, Alderman Brown?
Thank you. I would just like to add a few words to what Alderman Simonian and Alderman Cummings said, which was that I think if I think of the specific case of Roquette, it's clear there that in some sense they weren't looking for the money as much as just a buy-in from the city. Whether or not they were going to needed the money or didn't need it, come on, they were a large international corporation. Trying to figure out whether they needed the money or not needed the money, only a very expensive accountant could ever figure out. But they were looking, the gentlemen sitting in Northeast France were looking for a place in the United States that would welcome them. And a place where they knew that they were probably going to expand, they have already expanded, a place where some other people were going to move, and they were looking for just some indication that this is a place where we're going to be welcome, and we're not going to end up facing people with picket signs because it turned out we moved into the wrong, across from something in the town that was sacred or something. And, despite our best efforts, we didn't find out about it. They were just looking for that little bit of extra to say yes. And, this community does want us. As far as we can tell, there's good reason why we want them. So I think worrying about exactly whether the company absolutely needs us or can't make it, as Alderman Simonian make that, come on. Businesses fail, businesses succeed every day, and you can't predict it ahead of the time. So I would want us to welcome everybody. And, I think the Roquette was a perfect example of where it was partly just the goodwill that occurred. The mayor, the city, the alderman at the time, a lot of different people in the city worked with him and talked to them and said, look, this is the kind of place you want to move. Not only will you be successful, we hope, but, we're not going to stand in the way of expansion. Your people are going to enjoy moving here, et cetera, et cetera. And it's worked out for both of us in the end, many times over. So again, putting numbers on this, I'm always reminded the joke about the young accountant, right? What would you like the answer to be, sir? So,
And this was an exceptional company. It extended our utility system. It brought international
it worked out for
research
both
jobs.
of us.
Yeah.
But again, if I was one of these gentlemen sitting in northeastern France and considering these places that I barely knew what they were, I would be wondering, is this a place going to actually welcome us or not? So, thank you.
Alderman Cummings?
Go ahead. Go ahead,
Go ahead, no,
Sorry.
this is my second round, so please.
Alderman Kubler?
I had a couple of questions. As we look at Appendix A sub-areas, any reason why we're not including, for instance, professional centers or office complexes?
No, there was no reason why they weren't included.
Don't you think that
There are
that would be an area that we'd want to attract as well?
I think it would be allowable under the outcomes in the infill, but I don't know that we want to start abating property tax or permit fees for every office that comes into town to an existing office building. I'm not sure under what situation.
I'm really talking about, for instance, like new construction.
Okay. That would fall under the infill. That would be allowed. We were concentrating more, though, on, you're right, in this list, under Appendix A, there is more of a bent towards primary industries, which is ag, brings a value-added product is produced and it brings outside dollars in, or entertainment, which again is outside dollars, or retail, which is a sales tax. Offices is a different category, but it would be allowed. It's not excluded here. If the council would like it called out more.
I'm just wondering if it'd be beneficial to list it as well. I see it as growth area. I mean,
I think the reason it wasn't listed is because we don't have currently a large cluster, like an office park per se. We've got industrial, we've got Randall Road corridor, we've got the downtown, but we don't have large office projected land uses, like our industrial out in the southeast area. We're not showing any in our comprehensive plan for the future to be large office complexes. So we were focusing on the larger land masses and then everything else to be the infill. So that's, I think,
And
why
it's also our
not included.
highest vacancy
It's
rate still.
our highest vacancy, right?
So the thought was there's still some supply out there.
It seems that we're all getting hung up on the word infill. Maybe we should just say other properties, because that's broad enough that says we're appropriate. It seems like we're hung up on the infill word, and maybe we just change that to other, because it really serves what you wanted to
I
say.
agree
Is
with
it-
you.
I would recommend we change that to other properties, because then it's wide open, and everybody will understand that it's just not a tear down or something.
Does that,
Other
yeah.
people disagree.
Does that meet your thoughts?
That's fine. I had another question on the bank building on North Third Street that recently sold. Were there any incentives, or were we requested any participation in that at all? Okay. And then the sales tax incentive history, I see the last major incentive was given to Aldi in 2008. Have we had any other requests since then as far as sales tax incentives?
We have one, I'm expecting one, from an existing business wanting to expand. But no, I have not had any others
Okay,
since then that come to mind readily.
okay, thank you.
If I missed one, can you think of one?
We did a few years, if I might,
Yes.
we did a few years ago have someone come in and ask for incentive assistance, and we asked for a pro forma.
Oh, yes.
And they continued to ask, and we continued to insist on showing us a spreadsheet. And when they finally brought the spreadsheet in, it showed that they had a projected profit and that they didn't need any. And we pointed that out to them, that the pro forma that they had brought to us showed that they could do it without our help and still make a profit. So they said, yeah, you're right, so never mind.
And they're still in
And
business,
they're still in business.
so.
Alderman Cummings.
I'm going to beat a dead horse here. I'm looking over page 23, and I'm thinking how policy becomes guideline, and guideline becomes institutional memory and intent and all that. Because of the verbiage on page 23, applicants who meet, and this is at the bottom of the last paragraph, applicants who meet all guidelines and can provide justification regarding desired outcomes will be reviewed more favorably. That implies, speaking of guidelines, page 24, the bullet points. And the third bullet point is opportunity demonstrates a fund gap only attainable through incentive. I almost want to have that stricken. I don't want a business out there thinking that if they can't provide economic incentive necessity, that they're reluctant to ask. And an absurd but imaginable situation would be if Apple were to come here. How badly would we like Apple? We would love Apple to come to Geneva, Illinois. Apple doesn't need an economic incentive. They do need goodwill. Mm-hmm. They may need goodwill. They may like goodwill. And I think if we, in the guidelines, have that they need an economic incentive to even come to the plate and apply, and that if they meet the guidelines, they will be reviewed more favorably. We just head right down that path. And I don't think that there's no good that comes out of having that, and there's potential bad. And so I would say, get rid of it. If a person has need, they will ask for the money. If they don't have need, I would like them to ask for them. I'd really like them to ask for the money or some sort of incentive. And I wouldn't want that person not to do that. I wouldn't want Apple to go down to Batavia and say, Batavia doesn't have an economic need clause in their guidelines, so we didn't bother with you guys because we thought. So that's that's my only problem with that, is page 24, third bullet point.
I think that everything else you've talked about right now, everyone's been in pretty much consensus. This is one I'm not sure there is consensus, and maybe the council needs to
Yeah.
talk about that and maybe take a vote on that one. That's my thoughts on it.
Otherwise, love it.
Okay?
Thank you.
I
Great job.
understand Don's point, and I agree, striking that probably lets people realize that we will entertain stuff. I don't know.
Alderman Bruno?
Not to state the obvious too, but I think the greatest incentive that the city can offer is making Geneva just an attractive place to live and work. If Apple comes in, I think Apple employees would probably like to make dining and walking around in Geneva more attractive. So I think those types of businesses that ask for incentives, I think we can meet that. Not that we wouldn't give an incentive, but I think we can meet that just by making Geneva super attractive, and I think we're doing a good job of that. Thank you.
Alderman Simonian?
Thank you, Chairman. I would agree with Alderman Cummings. I had highlighted and struck it on mine as well, but why even make it an issue? Leave it wide open. We still have control, but you don't at least turn people away, and you don't know why they may or may not choose to come here. Thank you.
So which bullet point is that?
On page 24,
Third bullet
number
point on
3.
page 24, third from the top. Opportunity demonstrates a fund gap only attainable through incentive.
Mr. Kittredge?
I have a question about that. If this is an economic development incentive, you're talking about giving some kind of monetary value to the person asking. What do we base that on if there isn't a need? I mean, otherwise, what do we as staff base it on in order to know to bring it to you? Or do we just send everybody to you and say, make your case and negotiate your contract at the city council meeting? Is there any filtering before that point?
The question becomes one of whose need, ours or theirs?
Well,
I
they're
think-
applying for it.
No, but I think this policy is for us, not for them. This is for us to attract opportunity, not for them to take advantage of it, in my opinion. We put this together to try and get businesses an opportunity to Geneva, so the question becomes one of whose need is it? And I think it's ours, not theirs. And so we should design it to satisfy us, not satisfy them,
Well,
in my opinion.
I guess I'm talking specifically about this bullet point. Demonstrates a fund gap only. If it doesn't, then everybody that applies, you're saying we should bring forward.
Not necessarily, not necessarily, I would like to see who applies, period, out of curiosity, more than anything else. But after you do due diligence, you can recognize whether or not it's an opportunity for us, not for them. Number one. Number two is, this to me flies right in the face of a low-risk situation. Is high risk right out of the gates, in my opinion. That you're saying you don't even have the wherewithal, you don't have enough for lease, you don't have enough for taxes, you don't have enough to get cash flow, and here's what we're going to do to help you out. To me, that creates high risk right from the get-go. We have no fallback position for failure.
But we can point to CVS and Aldi and Gander Mountain, the other stores that were there before them. I mean, we can point to a dozen or more, when you've got a list of them, where we've used this but-for clause, and it has worked well. I mean, it has
But that
worked
was
so
for-
that it
that was
helps
it.
them and us, but it sets
Most-
expectations.
Most of that the question becomes one of would they have not come if the opportunity was not there, if the TIF wasn't there, those kind of things, that I don't know.
And most of these companies are looking in a region. They don't care if they're within the corporate limits on Randall Road of Geneva or Batavia or St. Charles. Doesn't make any difference. But Roquette, for example, we were competing with
Skokie and Gurnee.
2 or 3 other communities. So they were, I mean, they didn't come here because we were lovely. They came here because we gave them the best deal. We were in competition.
Right.
And the same thing on Randall Road. I mean, they don't care where they're, it's the same debate as when the city was looking to annex Randall Road. Should we, shouldn't we? And the city council at the time said, you know what? Just because we don't annex it doesn't mean there isn't going to be growth out there. So it's either going to be in Batavia or St. Charles, or we can move out there as well.
Right.
So, yes, it's going to come, but it's an edge that you may have over neighboring communities because they're drawing a circle saying, we want to be somewhere in this circle. So that's what it is.
But doesn't that argument in fact warrant removing this by saying
Yes.
opportunity demonstrates a fund gap that only attainable through incentives?
Well, for
So, I mean-
TIF, though, however, it legally has to show the but-for. Just
Well, the
saying.
TIF is a
So,
different, TIF is a
yeah.
different animal, but
Well, and the,
that argument just lends itself
property
to say,
taxes
I would
also.
say warrants even more reason to get rid of that clause, to allow that opportunity for those folks that are not they just want to regionally plop somewhere, or they want to regionally plop, and we give them a little, like with, is it Roquette? We're in competition, and that's what got it there. I mean, so all I'm saying is that I think we have to look at, in my opinion, the need is ours, not the potential economic factor coming in. It's us to develop the economic opportunity to give them a reason to want to come and do business here. Because if they're coming anyhow, they're coming anyhow. I mean, they might try and, pull the wool over our eyes and say, well, yeah, I'm not coming unless you give me an incentive. And I mean, we have to hopefully weed that out. And I don't know how we can do that, but all I'm saying is that I just think we allow the entire universe the opportunity, and then we decide at some point whether that opportunity is worth our while or not.
And the guidelines are trying to establish something from which that decision-making is based. Because in turn, we have to turn around to the public and say, we handed over this amount of money or waived this amount of fees of your money because,
No,
with an explanation.
In order to, yeah, and that's the important part. If we can quantify, which I love, yeah, we gave up 50 grand in sales tax rebates and we got over $1 million because Apple came here. That is absolutely defensible to someone in the.
That very experience and that very example occurred approximately 8 blocks from here, called Dodson Place. And that was not a unanimous vote. And while I believe it was the right thing to do, I certainly do, we all know from those who are here or those who read the press coverage, a lot of our more veteran restaurateurs and shop owners were livid. But to your point, we justified it based on that the turnkey operation was such that it would generate far more than we invested. In fact, I believe that sales tax reimbursement was a 90-10 split.
And it's still going on. They haven't collected it yet.
Yeah, so 90% of all sales tax will be returned to the developer, 10% us. And
It was a risky project.
it was a
though.
risky project, right. To your point, yeah, so we invested in the risk, and I think the developer, and to say something that Tom commented too, the vicissitudes of a council that changes every 2 years is risk enough for a developer to come and say, you guys have any guidelines in place? Nah, just, come see us, and it all depends how we feel. That's challenging too, because I've had folks come to me and say, what's the sentiment of the city? Well, by all means, you can, visit with our economic development team. We would encourage you to do so. Or, if you really want to spend some time, you can visit with the council members one by one. They're just looking for a guideline, something. Just tell me whether I'm investing my time wisely. But to your point, I think a guideline helps a would-be developer as well, so that they're not concerned about the, dare I say, the personalities at the time, whether it be the economic development staff, whether it be the council, whether it be, who knows, the community. So.
And
that's
it
just
can
my
always
opinion.
be revisited by
Oh,
future
yeah, sure.
councils.
That could be completely ignored.
I don't know that I hear consensus yet, though, on striking or not
Well, I agree. I
striking
don't
this.
know either. I mean,
You know,
Yeah.
if I might, you can have guidelines in place, and typically with policies, there's a disclaimer, saying that the city council, can vary from this policy, these guidelines, at any time. So if it's something that where someone absolutely has proven that they do not need the incentive, but they still want to continue forward, we have professional staff in place that would take that person to the mayor to discuss whether or not the mayor wants to bring that person to the city council. So, I mean, staff isn't going to be an obstructionist or a blockade. What we're going to say is, here's our guidelines that the city council put into place, and if they don't qualify and they're still looking for something, that doesn't mean that we're going to say no. It just gives them and us some guidelines to go by. Like I said,
Yep.
in general.
What is the upside of having that particular bullet point? What's the upside of having that bullet point in there, and what's the downside of removing it? And if we don't have an upside,
I can answer the upside. I think it sends a very clear message that we are indeed, to borrow a phrase, judicious with our public funds. We're not closed to the idea of investing, but let it be known that we are, and I hate this word, overly conservative about the monies we have to invest. We're responsible. But that's the upside I see it from a purely holistic point of view. The downside is, I don't disagree necessarily with yours and Tom's and others' comments too.
Well,
I would argue that it is not a judicious use of money to pass, and to go back to the absurd example, it's not a judicious use of money to pass when Apple comes knocking on the door. That is not a judicious use of money,
Nor would we.
and they don't need the money.
But you're assuming that we would pass simply because they don't need the money.
It's in the guideline. It's hard to
But-
prove a negative. We don't know who reads the guidelines and says, there's 6 different cities out there in the collar counties, and these guys want us to show economic need. And
But
We
under
don't have it.
review and approval, it says right here, the
Alderman
policy.
Flanagan,
Oh, sorry.
you're out of order, please. Mr. Cummings, you have any other issues?
no, you guys know my points, I think.
All right.
I
Alderman
don't want this
Markey.
to drag on all night. Thank you very
My
much.
concern here, I think, is probably some of the others. We have only capitalized. All the letters in only, if you read this, opportunity demonstrates a fund gap, only is all capitalized, attainable through incentive. So we're saying, hey, if you don't need it, if you don't have a funding gap, don't talk to us. And we're capitalizing all the letters in only, which tells people, like, don't even come to us unless you have a funding gap. And that's what I think we're arguing, is saying, at least come and talk to, at least take the capitals off of there at the bare minimum. Because, I think that's just saying, hey, don't come unless you really need an economic incentive. You may be the best thing for the city, but if you don't need a gap, we'll let you fight between Batavia and St. Charles. I think that's the issue there,
Okay.
at least for me. Only, and being capitalized just stresses it out, and that's part of the issue I think we're seeing here.
Alderman Flanagan, then Alderman Simonian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Alderman Cummings, it does say under review and approval, the policy does not give or allow any claim or right of action by any prospective or existing business or serve as a precedent for future incentive agreements with the city. So it does have a disclaimer in here like Mary McKittrick referred to, you know what I mean? So, I could live with decapitalizing only.
There's got to be a way to wordsmith it, I'm out of order.
Alderman Simonian.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna support Don 100% on this. It's, if you're an outsider looking in, and you're sitting back and saying, hey, listen, I want to come in, let's take a look at what the opportunity, if any of these folks have incentives, if they've hired a consultant to take a look at the policies or guidelines, and part of that is they're looking for that incentive or that warm and fuzzy, whether they need the money or they don't need the money, and we're immediately bumped out of the opportunity because our guidelines prohibit this. The other thing too is that, I mean, if I'm reading this and I'm saying, yeah, I'm looking for someone I'm gonna sign a 20-year deal, I wanna come to a certain community, and I read this, I personally am going to turn around and say, I'm not interested, or they're not interested in a potential opportunity unless it is my opportunity demonstrates a fund gap, and that's the incentive. So I immediately have discounted Geneva as an opportunity just by reading this, regardless of me coming and saying no, and then walking to the mayor's office and having all this other stuff. I just don't, I mean, I think, matter of fact, Joe made a comment about, when we were talking about fences, they never came to talk about barriers because they weren't even aware of the fact that it was so that it stopped them, that the policy stopped them before they went even any further to investigate any further. So if I'm looking at this and I have a potential, I'm going to say, we are looking for an incentive, whatever that may be, whether we need the money or we don't need the money, but it looks like this community's policy is that they're not offering it unless it's a gap, unless it's a gap.
Well, let me chime in to Mr. Cummings' point about proving a negative. Indeed, it's difficult. I have yet to experience anyone who has said, and I can't prove that anyone has walked away saying, I read those guidelines, the hell with it. Mm-hmm. I can't prove that. But I can prove, although I'm not willing to share in public meeting tonight, others who have come to me saying, I've read some of the stuff, how firm is this? Can I meet with council members individually? Can I lobby the planning commission? What's the turnaround time? Can we get together and talk about what's online and in print with respect to your policies to see if we can make this a little bit more friendly? I've seen that thousands of times, but I have yet to prove the negative where someone said, oh, I saw online you have A, B, and C, the hell with it. So, and just for the record, I'm not married to either way. I really am not. I think it's a great debate.
Mr. Chairman?
Excuse me, Alderman Brown, Alderman Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually do see the value in making sure we communicate that we would see funding gaps or opportunities with funding gaps more favorably when it comes to incentives. But I think it probably is too emphatic, and I might suggest verbiage that opportunities demonstrating a fund gap only attainable through incentive will be looked on more favorably, something to that effect. I don't know about striking it, because I like making, having people understand that there may be a higher bar, but it doesn't close them out. So if Apple comes in, we haven't shut them out, but we know, or they know, that if they've got a funding gap, that kind of works in their favor, at least in this discussion. Thank you.
Alderman Brown, and then Alderman Flanagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've discussed this enough and basically know each other's position, including the mayor and the city staff. But with your permission, can I offer an amendment at this point to get us off this sticky point? I move to amend the motion on the floor, change page 24 of the document by removing the third bullet point.
Second.
Is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
Second by
Wait,
Alderman
before you
Cummings.
vote, may I make a comment?
Yeah, question on the amendment?
If you do, you have to also recognize that some incentives legally require it with the TIF. So, you want to think about that for a second, pretty please?
Reword this and bring it back.
Well, the staff could certainly bring back a version of this that they believe
Yes.
agrees
Thank
with
you.
the.
Let us just, yes, let us wordsmith it. I have lots of notes,
Wordsmithing is
and we can
fine.
bring it back.
Now, I was just going to say, when interrupted, which I've done before myself, staff can certainly bring back by next week's meeting a verbiage of this particular set of bullet points, which they believe satisfies any state requirements, and yet which does not have what we consider a negative feeling to this particular statement. So I plan on voting in favor of this amendment to remove bullet point 3.
Just a friendly recommendation that that deadline be November 10th as opposed to November 3rd, since it only allows really two and a half days to refine. So, and plus it gives us the opportunity to debate it further at a committee of the whole meeting. So,
Is there any,
I have
yes,
a question.
yes, Ms.
I just want to make sure that the council is directing staff to take all of the comments into consideration and reword-smith this and bring a revised proposal back. Is that correct?
I do
Because
believe that is probably,
there were several different
consensus.
comments made by several different aldermen.
is that
so-
an agreement, council members?
Yeah.
Direction that Ms. McKittrick is recommending?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
because
you.
there were a lot of points brought up. that
Yes.
I don't want to go through line by line.
Yes, thank you.
We got them.
So then is it necessary for us to then vote on the amendment?
You don't have to even vote on it.
Excuse me,
It'll just be
I do have a
deferred.
motion on the table that was
Yes, we
seconded.
do.
The appropriate form would be to ask myself and the
It's the
seconder
seconder
if we
to
withdraw our second, in which case I would hope that the motioner of the original motion.
I do,
And
I
the
agree.
seconder would also withdraw because the staff has suggested they would like to reword it.
I agree. The seconder will
You agree that we will withdraw our
remove?
Yes.
amendment? We agree.
Yes, so?
Yes.
And the
So the
original?
amendment has been removed.
There's still a
Table.
motion on the
Necessary
table.
for a voice vote?
No need what?
No?
We need to table, don't we, till the next
You
meeting?
don't have to
Motion has
table,
been
we can
correct.
just bring it back. It can be just deferred.
So we're tabling, we are tabling the
We could either
motion.
table it or withdraw it. It's up to the original motioner is what they would like to do.
the original Marks and Cummings.
And
That was,
item
And
4C.
you can bring it back to a date certain of
Okay.
whatever dates you want, that's fine with me.
November 10th?
November 10th is
So we're
fine.
tabling
Tom, I
4C.
think you was,
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that
that's
all right?
fine.
November 10th?
motion by. Is
that all right?
Yeah, so we're tabling 4C. Okay.
Right, until
And pulling
November
this.
10th, when they're gonna have a
Okay.
chance to take all of our ideas and suggestions
Perfect.
and reword
Thank
it,
you.
and I'm fine with that.
Alderman Cummings, you are withdrawing your second for the original motion?
Yes.
And Alderman Marks? So the motion has been removed
Yep.
and will be once again brought before the committee of the whole on November
10th.
2nd?
10.
7th?
10th.
10th, all right?
Okay.
There is a motion on the table at the moment. The motion is
Oh,
to
I
table
withdrew.
until the 10th.
Yes.
Second.
No, it's, we amended ours.
So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I
Those
can't keep
opposed?
up.
All right, thank you. Let us carry on now to the next item, which is a presentation of the East Side Street TIF number 2 status report. This is just an update, which is going to be presented to us by Jason. So you may begin, sir.
Welcome again.
On a lighter note.
No, you brought a good discussion forward.
Thank you. So, as you stated, we're just going to do a historical report for the East State Street TIF. So, on an annual basis, the city has to provide a performance report to the state comptroller, which reviews the revenues and expenditures of the TIF fund. All these reports can be found either on our website or the state comptroller's website. Each year, there is a joint review board meeting. This year's will be December 12th. This involves all the taxing bodies that forego TIF fund revenues from the TIF fund. The reason that we are bringing this forward is on July 1st of 1999, the Illinois General Assembly passed that changed the laws for the TIF reporting. Any city that had started the creation of a new TIF district after that date is required by law to file a 10-year report with the state comptroller's office. The inducement resolution for this East State TIF was passed on February 11th of 1999, so we are not obligated under state statute to do a 10-year report. However, the Economic Development Department saw the benefit for both council and the city to provide a historical report. Just to go over a little bit of the history of attempts at redevelopment in the East State Street corridor. It started in 1989 with the passing of the Development Policies and Future Land Use document. This was a strategic plan for that area, the East Corridor. The following year, a Blue Ribbon Committee passed the East State Street Corridor Comprehensive Plan, which included just various uses and design guidelines. In 1993, the East State Street was part of the original downtown business district, which reached from East Side Drive to Anderson Boulevard, and that business district did expire in 2013. Again, in February of 1999, this is when the inducement resolution was passed. The following month, an RFP was released for a TIF eligibility study. That came back in December, and which was after the change of TIF laws, which was again in July. And then in February of 2000, ordinances 12 through 14 were passed, which was the creation of the TIF district. And in July of 2000, there was a planning document, the development guidelines for the East State Street TIF was passed as well. This is a historical performance for the EAV of this TIF district. As you can see, the EAV did peak in 2009 at a little over 7.3 million and has since been on a kind of a steady decline. Hasn't picked up again after the recession hit. Some interesting points that I just want to go over. This is a demographic report. This is a 1 mile radius. Information was taken from an ESRI report using 715 East State Street as a center for the radius. 36.5% of Geneva's population lives within a 1 mile radius of the TIF district. Another interesting point, if you notice, is 49.8% of all the rentals in Geneva are within 1 mile of the TIF district. The median age is 2 years below Geneva's median age of 41.4. And the median household income, although below Geneva's 97,515, is still well above the U.S. median income of 53,000. This is another ESRI report that's taken that goes over retail marketplace potential. If you notice, the only positive retail gap is in the 1 mile radius. This means that general demand exceeds general supply, showing that there is potential for market in the East State Street corridor. However, when you expand to the 3 and the 5 mile radius, there is a negative retail gap, meaning that people are coming from outside the city, from the area to shop here in Geneva. The traffic counts, this is another ESRI report. The intersection of the East Side Drive and State Street are 26,400 cars per day. And then State Street through the TIF ranges between 15,000 and 30,000 cars per day. So the TIF district does support market potential. Use this information for recruitment in the district. To go over some of the notable projects that have occurred since the inducement of the TIF district, in 2002, you have the development of the Munchie Peas complex, which is a 5,000 square foot multi-tenant building, and also the CVS pharmacy. As you can see, both of these did have city investment. However, it was substantially lower than the private investment that was given. The following year, you have Dairy Queen and the Valley Animal Hospital, another two properties that helped raise the EAV, as you saw, that peaked out in 2009. And then prior to 2009, you have the Aldi store. And currently, most recent project, notable project, is the purchase and demolition of 617 East State Street, which is currently for sale. Some other notable projects, one of the major expenditures was in 2003. Nearly $500,000 was spent on the environmental cleanup for Don's Gas for Less, which is at the northeast corner of East Side and State. This was only matched by a $50,000 private investment, so this was kind of one of the major expenditures of the fund. And then most recently, we have $500,000 for the Phase 2 engineering study for the eastern half of State Street. Just a basic investment summary. As you can see, public investment has been $1.6 million. However, private investment there is quite a bit at $7.8 million. The original EAV was $3.2 million. Currently, this past year, it's estimated to be at 5.7, and then again, this is well below the peak in 2009 at 7.3 million. Just to conclude, there has been a history of attention to East Side redevelopment. There have been attempts made. There has been a lot of gains made through those notable projects that I brought up. However, there is a declining EAV since the recession. There is a market, though, present in that area. One of the problems, however, is limited parcels. The ones that do exist on the market are shallow, have limited access, and small size. And within the last few years, there have been prospective investors come through. However, again, back to the limited parcels, those were the reasons that we don't have any of those notable projects and investments in the past few years.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions
No, very
for
good,
Jason, the council members?
I want to
Alderman's-
can I point out one thing first?
Yes, you may.
The numbers for the incentive assistance on the Aldi and the CVS were the property tax incentives from the TIF. If you look at the other document, there was also a sales tax rebate for both of those. So they did get more than what was in the one PowerPoint. They had two sources of funds.
Right. Alderman Simonian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this number wrong, or how do you get a marketplace potential on a 3-mile radius of a $226 million negative retail gap, yet on a 5-mile radius, you only have a $22 million negative retail gap? I mean, is that $226 million correct? Do you know?
This is taken from a ESRI report. This is what site consultants use, same program. This is part of our location one that we have in the state. Yeah.
No, that's, I mean, it just doesn't, within 3 miles, you have a negative
So
retail gap,
So
10
it's
times
another
higher
2
than a
miles.
5 mile.
It's the 2
Remember, they're
miles
showing you the
outside of
difference,
that
they're
that
not showing you the
rate.
numbers.
It's the difference.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think you do.
Those
Miles
numbers are
4 and
considerably
5.
bigger for the 5-mile radius.
Right, but wouldn't you think that?
Yeah.
But that's probably Batavia, or Batavia and St. Charles.
If you go to the city website, under the Economic Development Department, the available sites, it'll pull up a map. If you look at the bottom, there's a tab that has demographic reports that you can pull up. And there's several different reports that you can pull up. One of these, which is the retail market potential. One of those numbers might be large. Keep in mind that within 3 miles of the TIF district, you have all of the car dealerships in St. Charles, and those pull in a lot of outside business.
Mhm.
So just something to keep in mind.
Okay, it just, for some reason, seems like a 10 times more within 2 miles. It's, yeah,
Careful, that's a difference. It's a difference between two numbers. The 5-mile radius is a much larger number than the 3-mile radius. You're just looking at the difference between the two.
I'm looking at the negative impact.
Right, but that's just the difference between the, gotta be careful. 5-mile radius is a much bigger market than the 3-mile radius, huge. Contains Geneva Commons, it contains lots of things. The 5-mile radius.
Okay,
Are there any other questions?
thank you.
Anyone from the audience?
Let me get
All
underneath
right.
here.
Well, this concludes our Committee of the Whole meeting. Is there item number 5 on the agenda is new business? Is there any new business to come before the Committee of the Whole? Anyone from the, yeah, Alderman Flanagan?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind my gardeners, the gardeners of Geneva Beautification, that it's winter cleanup this Saturday. So if anybody has time, they can always come to the post office at 8 o'clock. We'll be there between 8 and 9, and we can always direct you to a garden. So that may need some help. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? New business? A motion is in order to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made by Alderman Marks, seconded by
Second.
Alderman Simoni. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We have to remember to log out, right?
Committee of the Whole is adjourned.
We're supposed to lock this computer?
Mike's both buttons shut down.